With all the limelight on Victor Wembanyama and Scoot Henderson at the very top end of all the mocks that have been coming out, it seemed as though common wisdom was saying that they were the easy 1-2 in the 2023 NBA draft. That was, at least, until Brandon Miller out of Alabama showed who he was as a player throughout the college basketball season. The best player on a powerhouse Alabama team, Miller displayed the type of skill set that scouts dream of. His length, paired with his on-ball skill set, has inspired draft experts to compare him to similar long wings like Brandon Ingram and Paul George. Do I buy the hype that he has worked himself into the number 2 conversation alongside Scoot? Time to find out. Welcome back to Hoop Hierarchy. This is KC. Brandon Miller started off born into an athletic family, as his dad played football at Alabama as a tight end, and both his brother and sister played college basketball as well. He grew up in Antioch, Tennessee, and really came into his own his junior year of high school, winning the Tennessee Gatorade Player of the Year award, averaging 23.3 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 2.6 blocks, and 2.3 steals, following up with a similar senior season and winning Tennessee Mr. Basketball. The well-rounded nature of his high school statistics really exemplifies the type of player and prospect that Brandon Miller is, a skilled two-way forward that makes the game look effortless and any team could use. So let's dive right into the skill set of Miller and try to determine the parts of his game that I think are going to be the true building blocks on where he builds his pro game. The first topic I want to discuss is just how pure of a shooter this guy is. He shot 38% from 3 as a freshman, and it isn't just set wide open jumpers he was taking. Miller has the ability to come off of screens, shoot off balance, steps into threes, very deep range. He can create some threes for himself. He is a little raw on a couple of aspects of his shooting touch, primarily the self-creation, as his bread and butter right now is kind of when someone else is creating for him. But he has shown enough promise on the self-creation aspect of his shot that I am confident that this is something that he's going to be able to refine and perfect as time goes on in his pro career. I mean, when discussing Paul George, it is definitely uncertain if Miller is ever as good as peak George in the NBA, but one thing that can be said is that his jumper and his offensive game in general is much further along as a prospect than George's was. George was a bit of a raw prospect as far as his jumper went coming into the league, while that, in my opinion, is Miller's best trait. And also, it's going to be his quickest trait to translate as well, in my opinion. Self-creation is a good area for him, but it's also an improvement area. I like how he moves with the ball, and he can earn himself some good shots for sure, but at the same time, he isn't the most explosive forward ever by any means. What I found is that his first step is nothing special, and his handle is pretty much average, so it isn't really enough to make up for the fact that he isn't super quick. What I think he can do to improve this very quickly is add some strength to his frame. He isn't built super skinny like a Kevin Durant type, so this should be very doable for him. I think with a little bit of extra muscle, he can make up for his relative lack of quickness. He gets knocked off of balance on occasion on these situations where he can't blow by someone. To me, that extra base strength gives him the ability to compensate for his quickness being subpar. Let me say, though, he has shown some promise in the self-creation aspect. He is by no means bad at it, that's not what I'm saying. But just with the more athletic and strong defenders, he can struggle and has. He does have a degree of craftiness to his game here that I think helps him out as well. So I do see potential in the self-creation aspect of his game. Speaking of his interior finishing, I just wanted to touch on this one a little bit. Some people have questioned his finishing, and while I don't see this as a major flawed area for him, I see why the questions are raised. Watching him at the end of the year in the tournament gives some level of concern, maybe a little bit of pause when it comes to, how good is he actually at finishing. However, I think that his finishing struggles he did show were more of a product of inconsistency, if anything. I think he's just a young player that hit a rough stretch. That being said, you want to avoid these rough stretches whenever possible, and I think, like I mentioned earlier, adding to his strength is going to be a big key here for him to finish over a stronger defender. Now to discuss his playmaking. So you would think that a primary scoring wing like Miller, the playmaking aspect of his game wouldn't need to be that effective, because that's not really what he'll be doing primarily in the league. And while that's partially true, what you see with a lot of the top wings in the NBA is that in the modern game, teams want to see their star guy playmake at least a little bit, due to the fact that they have the ball in their hands at all times. This is one thing I also really like about Miller as a prospect. So the fact is he's actually quite passable when it comes to creating for others, even at his young age. This is a sign to me that he has the potential to be at least competent at it on the pro end. Yes, he still makes questionable decisions on the passing front from time to time, but that being considered, he still is what I would say slightly above average for his position when it comes to making the right reads and finding guys when they are open. He is by no means a tunnel vision type of player, which a lot of young scoring prospects tend to be. He has patience in waiting for the right pass to open up, and his delivery is really solid. I like this trait a lot for him, and I feel like with some refining, it can be a real strength for him as far as wings go. Finally, his defensive game. So Miller is not a world beater on the defensive end, but he is good. Good enough that I would consider him a two-way prospect. Most of his flaws on the defensive end come from a couple of issues we've already discussed, namely his lack of quickness and lack of strength. However, he does a pretty good job in positioning for the most part, and he has shown a solid ability to get some timely blocks and is just a pretty good shot contester in general. Defense is not a huge strength by any means for him, but it's not a weakness either. So something else I want to kind of point out as an aside for Miller is the fact that I think the absolute best thing for him to do was go the college route. As of now, college ball is, to me, still easily the most viable option to make a name for yourself. Yes, the G League Ignite has worked for Scoot, the French League has worked for Victor, Overtime Elite has worked for the Thompson twins. The thing is, though, these guys were considered top prospects coming out of high school, or in Victor's case, as a younger player. All they had to do was continue playing like they were at least close to it, and they were going to stay high in the draft rankings because they kept the intangibles that made them desirable, so to speak, like their explosiveness or Victor's just incredible size. I'm still not convinced that it will be easy for a player to make a name for themselves in those leagues like they can in college. Miller was a highly ranked prospect, yes, but I think he was something like 17 on college recruit rankings. He wasn't being considered at the top end of the draft. He might have been considered a lottery pick coming into the college season, but the performance of Alabama himself propelled him right to the conversation at the top of the draft. I think that the eyes that college basketball draws as a big catalyst for that. I think a young guy that performs well in Overtime Elite, let's say, I think he could rise maybe a little bit, but I also think the questions of competition, no eyes being on him, I think the ceiling of raising his draft stock, I think, is lower than if a young guy goes crazy on a college team, kind of like what Miller did. I just think the ability to improve your draft stock is much stronger in the college game than it is in any other avenue to the pros. Plus, I think that right now, college still has the best coaches to develop guys for the professional leagues. Now, I have to, of course, address the elephant in the room, so to speak, and that is the situation that occurred with Darius Miles and the killing on Alabama's campus, where Miller provided the weapon to Miles. To me, if I were to rank this on a scale of how concerning it is to his long-term prospects, I would say it's somewhere in the middle. It isn't just an absolute game-changing situation where you just can't draft him. As you can see with mock drafts, teams still rank him very, very high. It's not like he's fallen like crazy. But I also think it's not nothing. I mean, he'll go high regardless. And he wasn't charged with any crime. He is not a criminal. But I just think, fairly or unfairly, this will give GMs the thought of, maybe this isn't the biggest deal, but it makes you think, is this kind of become a pattern of conduct issues? Do we have to be concerned about this for something down the line? For me, personally, I don't think so. I think he probably learned his lesson here. But at the same time, it's something that has to be taken into account as far as general managers go and drafting a guy this high. Everything has to come into the equation when evaluating a guy like this. And this is going to be something that teams talk about, for sure. Now for his comparison, this is more of a reiteration of what I had already said because it's kind of the main focus of this video. But there are various reasons why I think I can see a lot of Paul George and Brandon Miller. Mainly the build and skill set, a lanky, tall, pretty athletic wing that can score and play a bit of defense, basically encompasses both PG and Miller. I think to me, Miller is the prospect that a lot of people wanted Jabari Smith to be last year. I didn't personally love Jabari coming in as a prospect. I thought he was a bit too mechanical and kind of one-track minded on offense. He didn't seem as comfortable or as fluid on the ball as Miller currently does. They have some similarities too, but yes, I like Miller much more overall as a prospect than I did Jabari. And I think Miller has a better chance to hit that all-star type player ceiling, or even higher than what Jabari Smith, at least what I thought he did. In conclusion, the traits that I think are going to make or break Miller's development are his self-creation and his interior finishing. I think that he is pretty sure to be at least a decent shooter, and I think his defense will translate fine. I just think he has to focus up on bulking up a little, as I believe the issues and concerns that people have with his self-creation and his finishing can all stem from strength. And if he gets stronger, he's going to be able to finish through contact much better, and it'll give him better balance to handle contact on his drives. I think if he takes care of this, everything else is going to come along, and he'll be very reasonably be able to reach his all-star ceiling. I think he's a fine pick in the top 3, and in the hypothetical that a team in the 2 spot doesn't need a point guard or just really likes Miller, I could see an argument where he's worth taking there over Scoot. Personally, I wouldn't. I think there's probably some value in reaching out to the team in the 3 spot and seeing if they're willing to trade up and give a little bit of assets to get Scoot and kind of confirm that they're getting him. But that being said, Miller is a good player, for sure in the conversation for the top 3, maybe the top 2 under the right circumstances. And that will conclude this video. I thank you all for watching. As always, I appreciate all the support. If you like this type of content, be sure to like and subscribe. And of course, all this is just my opinion based on what I've seen on his tape. If you agree or disagree, let me know. But with all that, thanks again for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed.